He was running global accounts at a $4 billion AI company. Then he quit to sell software to property lawyers. Ryan Fitzpatrick spent a decade in video tech, climbed to the top at Synthesia, and walked away to build Orbital's entire US sales operation from scratch. In this episode, he talks about why he believes horizontal AI tools don't help you run, they just get you off the blocks. What it takes to sell to people who are literally trained to find holes in everything you say, and why the product, as you see it today, is the worst you're ever going to see it. This is taking LegalTech to market. Let's go.
Ryan, you spent a decade in video tech. You were running global accounts at a 4 billion AI unicorn, and then you've jumped ship to sell AI to property lawyers. So walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty normal transition, right? Yeah, I think, it's been a really fun transition. I think for me, I mean, you kind of said it, 10 years in one space is a really, really long time. And I was pretty hungry to see something new and learn something new. It's interesting too, even when I left Vimeo, I had these grand aspirations that I was going to go try a new industry, and then the Synthesia offer was kind of too good to turn down. But when I made the change this time, I really had two strong hypotheses coming out of AI video, which was I thought healthcare tech and legal tech were the most ripe for disruption. And when I looked into various different firms and what I wanted to do next, legal tech was really the most interesting to me. I think things in healthcare like HIPAA compliance and things of that nature are still going to be a big challenge that has to be overcome for those techs to be adopted in a really meaningful way. Whereas legal, it just feels like it's the moment. And I think I've sort of been made right by a lot of the funding routes you've seen through the market recently. Yeah, the other big piece for me too was I think to create true business value, being a tool that is specific was also really important, which was ultimately what drew me to Orbital.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember you mentioned to me before that you said something interesting. You said that horizontal AI tools don't help you run; they just get you off the blocks. When did that kind of thought process come through for you? And tell me a bit more about what you mean by that.
Yeah. So, when I was first looking into a lot of, legal tech, obviously you're first with the Harveys, the Lacoras, whatever it might be, because they're, making the most noise on the market. I think what I learned in the conversations I had with some folks who were working at those places was, this is a really great entry point into AI for a lot of legal firms. But ultimately, these firms are broken up into different disciplines for a reason, because there's specialization across every single thing. You wouldn't necessarily have a litigation lawyer doing your real estate work, right? So it made a lot of sense to me that in order to provide true business utility, to be something that could actually provide a deliverable at the end to a client, you had to understand the nuances of what that particular discipline needed to be. And if you look across all the various different legal disciplines, it's not too hard to see that real estate is the world's largest asset class. So specialization around the world's largest asset class in legal, and frankly, the whole legal profession began with real estate. That to me made a lot of sense.
Yeah, does make sense. Absolutely. And what's been two parts to this question, I guess. What's been the biggest surprise going from your previous ICP to this new ICP you've got in terms of who you're selling to? And then, and a backup question is that, what do you think you've brought with you that works really well?
Yeah, I think so. Let's see. Biggest surprise. I think I'm actually a little bit surprised at how on board these attorneys are to actually try this. I think I came in with this massive fear of, man, they're getting these folks to actually try AI tech, and getting them to really potentially adopt this is going to be hard. And I was up for that challenge, but I'm really pleasantly surprised at just how game everyone is to say, you know what, we know this moment is coming for us. We know we need to adapt or die. And watching them take it on head first has been amazing. And in terms of what's really worked well, regardless of the industry you're in, I think, there's a bit of an art and a process to sales that doesn't change regardless of what you're selling. I think if you're disciplined in your process, if you do really strong discovery, if you understand your client's pain, you translate that to something that, is impactful to their business, that's still how you sell software. It really doesn't matter what type of software you're actually selling. The same basic principles are always going to be true. And I think as long as you run a really strong, rigorous process throughout your sales, then you're still going to get people to adopt your software.
I think for me, the interesting thing about LegalTech, and you mentioned around the how surprised you have been that people have had the appetite for what you're selling and they want to hear about it. I think for me, legal has been just a little bit behind other sectors. So I think the people within it have been, okay, when do we get our turn to kind of make our lives easier and utilize AI? So maybe that's something you're seeing. But Orbital, if I'm right, has got Clifford Chance, Slaughter and May, Freshfields, Herbert Smith's Free Hills on the client list. So in the UK, it looks like you've done a pretty good job of cracking the magic circle. How is that being replicated in the US? Is it the same kind of playbook or completely different?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of correlation. I mean, obviously, much of what was driving the move, to take on the US, I mean, obviously the market size, we could just start with that. But, it was a lot of our customers in the UK telling us that, they've got partner firms and their own firm that are out there that want a chance to use a technology like this. So it was really just a bit of a no-brainer. And in terms of the playbook, I mean, you're attacking, your AmLaw 100, 200, 500. It's the same general idea and, just sort of skinned a different way in the States. And, I think what's actually been even more interesting is I think there's so much more complexity to real estate transaction in the US than there is in the UK, which is making this tool even more valuable than I think it would have been if it just stayed a UK tool. So it's providing a higher level of value. I think we're taking on clients at a much faster rate than I think we would have expected. And I think the most interesting thing is just how much word of mouth coverage we've been able to get. They all know each other. They're all talking to each other. And I think they all are having the same conversation that this is special. This is different. This is differentiated from those other tools that are on the market. And it's providing real value for real estate attorneys to transact in a more effective way.
And is that, I know the other thing you mentioned and we'll probably talk about this, is how when you joined, so much of what you did was outbound and now you're seeing a lot more inbound. Has that come just from those people talking more and more? Has the funding announcement impacted it or something else? What would you make of that?
I would say perfect storm of all those things, between the referrals that we're getting, between the funding announcement. We've arrived. I really don't think there's any other way to put it. There's a good friend of mine that I work with who leads our BDR team. And, when we walked into this business, it was all outbound. And now, we've spent the last couple of months since the funding announcement, just fielding a lot of really exciting inbound and a lot of really exciting referrals. And, we kind of didn't factor it into the math as far as where we're going to get all of these opportunities from and the ways to talk to all these great firms. And it's been a bit of a blast, if I'm being honest, the last few months, just being able to get those inbound calls, to have the knock on the door, to be like, well, we knew exactly why we want to be here. We know exactly what you guys are doing. We just want to move fast. And that, I mean, there is really no more rewarding moment as a go-to-market leader than that kind of change in the dynamic as to where your leads kind of come from.
Whenever whenever anyone's doing a pitch in any market, there's natural skepticism from the buyer as you take them through that process. With lawyers, though, when you're selling to lawyers, they're literally trained to find problems with things and to find where the slip ups are. How do you run a sales process where your buyer's instinct is more than anyone probably to pick apart every claim you make?
Yeah, in a strange way, I enjoy this thoroughly. That just makes me an odd guy, I guess. But no, listen, we know how risk adverse our customer base is, and we operate in a way to make sure that we provide enormous levels of transparency. This is the single most robust discovery process I have ever been a part of in my entire sales career, because we're not only allowing them to vet us to make sure that we're the right partner to build their business around, we're vetting them to make sure that they are the right firm to bring on board here to help raise the games of all the people who are working in this particular field and industry, right? So we don't just kind of let people in, let them kick the tires and kind of run off. We really want to understand you're here for a reason. What is that reason? How can we help? What does the impact make? What are the risks involved in that? We go deep to make sure that this is right for both parties. And I think that is such a different mentality than potentially a lot of other go-to-market teams are doing because they just get it at all costs. Whereas we want the right people and we want them to be here for a really long time because we know once this tool is integrated into a workflow, you have to trust it and it's probably going to be there for a really long time. It's hard to make a change. So we take that really seriously and we want to make sure we're making partnerships that are mutual and work for both sides.
Yeah, 100%. And I know you mentioned earlier that the intricacies of US real estate law may be perhaps more difficult perhaps than the UK. And I guess even for in the US for yourself, how difficult has it been learning the real estate ecosystem, the jurisdictional nuances, and how have you got yourself to a point fairly quickly? I'm assuming because obviously you haven't been there too long where
Yeah.
you're credible.
I think me and Notebook LM have become really good friends.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's just, I'm super privileged in that, this actual tool has been built by actual real estate attorneys. And we have actual real estate attorneys who have practiced, who are part of the sales process. Our lead LSA, I think I pretty much just followed her around the building for my first 5 months and just asked questions constantly. And, you know, I try to take an opportunity every day to just read a little bit more, learn a little bit more, listen to a little bit more. And I would give myself like an 8 out of the 10 scale of like, I think I'm almost there. And there's always going to be that last bit where I probably need to go to school for another 20 years and learn a lot. But I think it's a matter of just as long as you can speak the language, which is where I spent most of my time out of the box, you could start to piece together quite a bit. And, I think I'm pretty close. And I think there's always going to be more room to grow and to learn. But um, I was up for that challenge and I've really enjoyed getting to dive deep into something completely new and completely outside of my comfort zone. And my sort of goal whenever I walk out of something like this is to just be an expert in a completely new thing. Um, that to me gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, love that. And I understand your CRO is a former lawyer from Clifford Chance. How powerful has that been in terms of your development and kind of understanding what you need to know about your target audience?
Yeah, yeah, she's a badass. So I think that's a big reason I took the job, candidly. Yeah, I think what she's been able to build here from just a bootstrap nature from the ground up is incredibly impressive. I think her sales acumen is exceptionally high, and I think her instincts are pretty spot on. And of course, the fact that she got to start this kind of as a bit of a credibility play where, she was an expert in the space and kind of then got to become an expert in sales. It gives me a lot of hope in the sense of, I made a similar move when I first got into video tech where, I had the dreams and aspirations. I was going to go make TV shows and then I ended up in video SaaS. Right. So I kind of leaned on my expertise in a space to become an expert in the sales profession. And I think, her kind of doing that the opposite direction, it's inspiring to a certain extent. And it kind of makes me feel like, cool, I could do this too. This isn't a big deal. You can kind of just grab the skill sets, lean on your strengths and build.
I work with a lot of legal tech companies, and often when we're hiring salespeople for them, one of the number one things they look for is and often it's a compulsory that this person must have experience selling to lawyers or law firms. If there's a legal tech founder listening to this and they're about to make their first go to market hire and they're debating about someone with legal industry experience and saying that is the be all and end all, what would you kind of say to that?
It really depends on what else you have available to you in the building, right? So if you've got a really strong group of people who have a deep understanding of legal tech and a deep understanding of the legal space, and you can plug in a go-to-market leader who's got an exceptionally strong process and playbook, those things can marry really well. But if you're kind of not sure you have the in-house expertise in the legal space to have credibility, and then you bring in a sales leader who potentially also doesn't have that credibility yet, I would probably characterize that as a recipe for disaster. I think if I was the first sales leader hired here out of another industry, that would probably be a little bit risky. Whereas I got to come in with the privilege of people who had been in the legal space, knew the specifics of kind of what we needed to do, but what they really needed was somebody with a lot more process and a lot more playbook who'd just been through a few scale ups and could kind of build the machine. So this has been a really good marriage in that sense. So it's super important to understand the other parts and pieces you'll be putting around that person before you dive first into someone who might not understand the language in the space.
And for you, when you're hiring account executives into your team, what's that kind of checklist of things you have to see, have to have, be it background experience or, the intangibles?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if I'm unicorn hunting, obviously somebody who's been in legal and property tech for 10 years and, who could do that. I mean, that would be great. Is that reality? Definitely not. I think it's a similar thing. I like to have a mix, right? I think the hires I've made so far, it is literally a mixed bag. I've got some people with deep real estate expertise. I have some people who have never touched this at all. But in terms of hiring successful account executives and kind of that series A to C range, you're really just hyper indexing on drive and intelligence. I think if they come in with those two things, they can learn your space and they'll be driven to do so. If they don't have those two things and they're kind of just looking for that playbook to be handed them on day one, they don't understand how to dive into new markets, ask really strong questions, they're going to struggle. And so it's super, super important to run a very thorough interview process to really understand what makes those people tick, what excites them, what's going to get them out of bed in the morning. Because if you pick up on those things and you get it right, you will just have people that'll run through walls because they're going to love this. They're going to eat it up. They're going to want to learn. But if you just go with someone who's maybe got 10 years of experience in maybe like, some sort of SaaS that isn't completely relevant, there's a chance they're going to stagnate in this.
Is there any killer questions you have in your locker that you pull out to kind of dive into those people and see if they are the right fit and they've got the right drivers?
I think I think there's a lot you dive into. I think probably the best skill set I picked up from my time at Synthesia was just the art of the interview.
Mm.
And really running a strong intangibles based interview. I think, there's folks that you could teach certain skills to. I could teach you how to use MedPick. I could teach certain frameworks. I can help you out with a lot of those things, but I can't teach you how to react to a situation. I can't teach you how to necessarily have, the emotional intelligence to read the room. So when you're interviewing candidates, going deep into their story, understanding the decisions they made to get to certain jobs, understanding how they interacted with certain bosses, understanding what makes them tick on a human level will give you a lot of strong indications on the things that you can't necessarily teach them. Whereas just going through a set of questions of like, hey, can you run this process? You understand this? Like that's all fine, but that's all stuff that ultimately, if you've got a smart, driven person, you can teach them to do those things. So it's a bit of an art. And I really enjoy it. And it's something that, I've had the privilege to hire a lot of people over the last few years. And I think, the way I build my teams, especially in this environment, is I try to make sure every person I bring in brings something to the table that I don't have yet. That's going to raise all ships. And when you put the building blocks together in that way, you end up having a really cohesive unit by the end.
Yeah, I love that. I know you said on our call previously that you need to continue iterating the product and pushing boundaries. How do you balance that the sales team's need for a stable product to sell against the products team's need to keep shipping? So that tension between sell what we have and build what we need.
Yeah, I mean, I guess candidly, that's why you join one of these. If you wanted something in perfect balance, I heard Oracle's hiring, have a good time. But no, it is a big challenge, but it's also the best thing. Whereas, when I get on with a customer and we have a back and forth and they're like, maybe there's a product gap here, this, that, you know, I am always right when I say, listen, the product as you see it today is the worst you're ever going to see it. Tomorrow it'll be new. Tomorrow it'll be better. Tomorrow it'll be different because we've taken your feedback on board and we're going to be able to act really quickly. We get ourselves in trouble sometimes, like any good, startup environment where maybe we shipped something too soon. Maybe we were ahead of our skis on something, but you don't differentiate, you don't innovate in the market if you don't try things, if you don't listen and try to push those boundaries. So, I as a sales leader, there was a time in my career where I thought I was going to go into product, and I really almost did. So, like, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the challenges that those teams face, and always kind of am excited to see how we can do it. So I work really hard to be as empathetic of a go-to-market leader as possible to the goals and the challenges that the product team faces. And, you know, when something falls down, when something doesn't go right, we miss on something, I usually try to treat that as this is just our opportunity to grow and our opportunity to innovate. And sometimes that's going to have some pitfalls, just as it is when you miss on a deal or you miss on a champion call or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you approach your year end and you look forward to the next kind of 12 months from April onwards, what is on the agenda for Orbital and yourself?
So I think obviously we want to scale out the team. We want to expand our market. There's a lot of different areas outside of just law firms that Orbital makes a lot of sense, whether that be, retail businesses, REITs, there's so many different avenues that we can go down and add value. And I think ultimately for Orbital, it's not just about what we do now, but it's ultimately about the core mission of how do we create efficiencies within real estate transaction where we come to a point that real estate can be traded as easily as stocks, right? How do you lower that bar of entry? How do you reduce the complexities, the time spent to transact in real estate? One of the things our CEO says a lot is real estate is typically the biggest, most consequential purchase anyone makes in their life.
Yeah.
Um, is deeply emotional in that sense. So being able to eliminate layers and layers and layers of complexity and stress from that, in our case in commercial in the US, but just as we look at our wider mission to just reduce that as a whole, it's very meaningful. And it's something that can truly shift the landscape in a pretty meaningful way.
What's going to stop you getting where you want to get to in the next 12 months?
Um, I mean, I'm gonna put the lens just on myself and my team, and it's really just execution. We are relentlessly focused on executing at a high level, at building the machine in a way that, you know, when these companies show up and need to talk to us, our team will be in a position and we'll be ready to understand them and get them through the process and get them into the product in a really effective way. Like that's our end of things, right? And I think we're building a team that's gonna be able to do that as a business. Listen, I think the world is our oyster right now. I think we have a moment in time where we're very differentiated and we're attacking the right market at the right time. I was at Legal Week a couple weeks ago now, and I walked the floor and I didn't see one other company who's tackling real estate, not in the way we are, not with the focus we have. And for me, having that moment in time to be special, to be different, gives us an opportunity to create a massive moat around what we're doing. And I think we're doing it extremely effectively right now.
Just going to finish up with a question I like to ask everybody, and that is, if you could ask your younger self, and by you for your younger self, I mean when you were back in October when you started at Orbital,
Yeah.
what's one piece of advice you give yourself?
Oof. So this is young Ryan of October.
Exactly, young, fresh ride from October 25.
Ooh, what advice? Boy, I guess, I mean, the only thing I'd ever want to do faster is I wish I could just absorb more of the knowledge faster. I think I probably would have made myself a few more of those notebook LMs to really listen to on my train rides back and forth to understand the industry more, just to be able to dig a little deeper. I mean, it's my day to day challenge. Wish I had the 20 years of experience in being a real estate attorney, right? That just lends so much credibility to my day to day. But um, no, I mean, I guess like I don't have a lot that I would do differently to date so far. I think I'm really happy with the team we're building, the path we're taking, the company that we're building. It's an absolute privilege to take part in day to day.
Love it. Well, look, I'll be rooting for you, rooting for Orbital. Thank you so much for being a part of taking legal tech to market.
Thanks, Paul.